Hi, everyone. Sorry for the slightly late start. I see participants are joining now. We'll give you a second as people are joining. Want to say hi again. And if we can go to the next slide, this is the next session, week two in our series, and week two of peer-to-peer world virtual conference. We have a lot of sponsors that have helped make this happen, and we thank them all. This is today's schedule at a glance. We just wrapped up the virtual team trivia. Sorry, that's why we're a moment or two late. And later on, we're the email communications workshop today, a couple other great sessions later today, along with a virtual walk if everybody wants to get out and stretch your legs and do that virtually with other participants. That's happening at 2 p.m. East. All these times are Eastern time. So looking forward to that. If you want to go to the next slide, again, we came up with this this session idea. It was myself, Carrie, and Julie came up with this idea, trying to think about, email communications workshop would be a good thing to kind of do over 5 weeks. And if you were involved in last week's session, you saw that even that session alone could be 5 weeks. Same thing with this session, right? It's packed with a lot of information, a lot of details, and we're looking forward to having our guest speaker this week, Joanne Collins, who's going to be introduced here momentarily, talk more about this week's topic. So let's go on to the next slide. And I believe, Carrie, you are on the line to talk about who covered a lot of last week's session. If you want to talk about last week's homework. Oh, I think you just went back on mute. She should be joining us home.
$5 now for doing that.
Yeah, it always happens that way.
She might be having some troubles connecting. So Mark, if you want to go ahead with homework and covering the homework, hopefully she can join us back in a couple moments.
Yeah, if you want to go on to the next slide. Last week, again, was all about strategy. And if you weren't able to make it, don't worry. These sessions are being recorded so you can review them afterwards, including this session, all 5 of them, and all the other sessions that we're doing. But last week, it was all about getting a clear on your goals and your priorities of your program. Make sure you articulate what the program must do in order to be viewed as successful, and figure out how the program relates to or complements or competes with your other peer-to-peer or event fundraising programs. So again, just holistically, how does it fit into all the different campaigns you have running? What are the goals? And making sure that's clearly defined and all your stakeholders agree on that, right? And then going on to the next slide, we got started talking about audience, making sure it's clear who your primary target audience is, right? For both recruitment, getting folks to register for the campaign, and then also your donors, figure out what you know about them on average. And again, the main focus here is your participants that you're communicating to, because a lot of your donor communication will actually come from your participants, right? Determine what other information you'd like to know about the individuals so you can customize your e-communications to really support that. And set a plan to collect that information. So last week was all about really the foundational, making sure you know your goals, know your audience, start to sketch out how you can leverage that information at each stage of the journey, right? From recruitment to activation, to get them to remind them that it's a fundraising event, right? You might be doing a physical event, it might be a virtual campaign, but either way, even if someone's just doing a 5K to get their personal PR, a personal record, or whatever it might be, just remind them that it is a fundraising activity. And then optimize that messaging, optimize their maximizing their fundraising, their outreach, advocate on your behalf. All right. And then how do you retain them, right? Think about what happens beyond the event and making them part of your overall constituent base. And finally, informing and making sure that you are sharing information with that team, with those individuals, with those participants, and making them an informed member, extension of your team, really. All right, it looks like Carrie has rejoined us. I'm not sure if she has anything to add. But definitely want to keep things moving. And Carrie, you with us?
I'm with you by
Excellent.
phone. And yes, Mark, I'm sure you covered that all beautifully, and we will keep the ball rolling. Sorry for the distraction.
No worries. It's all good. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, this is week 2, timing and segmentation. And so let's jump right in.
All right, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to join everyone last week. I had a death in the family and so was out of the office. So thank you to Mark and Carrie for managing the bulk of last week. I was really just going to be honest, a pretty picture, but really maybe I should introduce myself, right? Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. My name is Julie Brock, and I am the online fundraising manager for Susan G. Komen. And my job is primarily, especially right now as we're coming in Breast Cancer Awareness Month and our bulk of Race and Walk event series is eComms. Why I'm living and breathing and in the midst of eComms right now and trying to put together a plan and how are we going to do this and what's the best way to go about it and who has the right answers. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel with Mark and Carrie, and then also hearing all of these truly amazing guests who are going to be talking about and sharing their knowledge to help us all grow and become better eComm writers and distributors and keep our participants happy and coming back. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce today's special guest. Joining us today and doing the bulk of our chat and telling you all about timing and segmentation is Joanne Collins. And she is the senior copywriter at Event 360. And if any of you are like me and perhaps participate in the Susan G. Komen 3-day event or any of the myriad events that Event 360 has their hands in and does such amazing work on, then it's likely that you've probably seen Joanne's work in the midst of all of your stuff. So I'm really excited to have her here today. She is really just going to be sharing her wealth of knowledge with us, and I'm really excited for you all to hear what she has to say. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. Just a little bit about myself. I have been doing eComms for nonprofits and peer-to-peer fundraising events since before eComm was even a thing. I started working on the 3-day when it very first began in 1998, also worked on the original AIDS rides. I've been with Event 360 since 2004. Writing, implementing, strategizing e-communications for our clients for a variety of events, from the 3-day to AIDS walks. I've done 5Ks and mud runs and stair climbs, and there was like a bounce house event with kids, sort of like any, like you name the type of peer-to-peer fundraising event, I have done eComm strategy for it. So I'm really excited to talk about it. This particular week is specifically about timing and segmentation. So let's tackle timing first. So next slide. When it comes to timing, there's essentially 3 levers you can pull as far as things that you can shift on your timing. The first is, when do you start? When do you launch registration for your event? When do you start recruitment? And when do you start regularly communicating to your participants? The second lever is when you shift your focus from recruitment to activation. Most of the time, both recruitment and engagement communications will be happening at the same time, but there's kind of a sweet spot where you shift your focus, and it will vary by type of event, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And the other timing lever is frequency. So how often are you communicating to people? How often are you sending recruitment emails? How often are you sending participant engagement emails? Like all aspects of timing, this varies by type of event, which we'll talk about. And it also varies over the course of the season. It's not sort of a set thing, although there's guidelines like email once a month or email once a week. Frequency will bunch up around, obviously around deadlines, around discounts, around challenges, registration closing, things like that. And frequency will also vary by segmentation. You'll have different frequencies for different types of audiences, but segmentation is the second half of this call. So let's break it down about how timing varies by events. So for our purposes, I'm going to put events into 4 different types, 4 different buckets, and your event probably falls into one of these. The first type is a fundraising event. Fundraising is the #1 focus of this event, but the entry level to fundraising is small. There probably a small fundraising minimum, if any. There could be no minimum, but fundraising is definitely heavily encouraged. This type of event is not a large physical commitment. Examples are like 5Ks, bike rides, any activity that pretty much anybody can do. And your audience is primarily there because they really care about your cause. That's why they're there, to raise money for your cause. The second type of event is an awareness event. It's usually low commitment, not hard physically, no fundraising minimum. Your goal is large number of participants. Your primary goal is just visibility and or building up your base of contacts. You're just trying to get more emails in the database, and you're just trying to get people in your community to know that you exist. So examples of this are large walks, festivals or music festivals, also social media events. I would put in this category. Things like the Ice Bucket Challenge that don't necessarily occur in the same physical space, but are an awareness event. The third type of event is activity-based. It's some sort of appealing physical activity, maybe challenging. The majority of participants for an activity-based event don't necessarily have any connection to your cause. They're in it for the fun. Examples of this could be races, mud runs, obstacle courses, stair climbs, races, either bike races or running races that people sign up because they're bikers or runners and they just want to do another type of race. And then the fourth bucket is a high commitment event. There's a high fundraising commitment. There may also be a high physical commitment involved. The majority of the participants have a strong connection to the event, strong connection to the cause as well. And they keep coming back. You tend to have a strong loyalist base here. Examples of this are like multi-day walks, multi-day bike rides, marathons, cross-country journeys. Sometimes there's events that's like, literally a walk from one end of the country to the other. Things that really involve a high commitment. You have to train, you have to fundraise, and have a long lead time. So with those buckets in mind, how does timing vary? So for a fundraising event, this is a smaller event. Fundraising is the focus, but not a huge fundraising commitment, but people are definitely there to raise money for your cause. You generally want to launch around 6 months out. So that would be when your recruitment communication would start to people who aren't registered. And for participants, you want to do an immediate onboarding series to get them fundraising right away, get them used to like, okay, here's your tools, here's what you use to fundraise. And then once they're onboarded, if they're onboarded like 6 months out, you can go a little quiet and then increase in frequency around 3 to 4 months before the event. So get them fundraising right away while their commitment is fresh, and then push it towards the end. As far as when you shift, so when's the shift that goes from recruitment to engagement? For these types of events, usually around 2 to 3 weeks out before the event, you want to ease off the recruitment emails and really focus on engagement, because since your primary goal is fundraising, someone who signs up the week of or the day before is not going to get much fundraising done. So you really want to put your primary efforts in getting the people at about 2 to 3 weeks out, focus on the people who are already registered and getting them to boost their fundraising. You may send one final recruitment email for registration is closing. If it's a virtual event, a final push to get them to register as a virtual participant. If there is no virtual element, consider your final recruitment email. Maybe perhaps do you want to make a donation if you can't participate? That would be one way to shift your recruitment emails at the end. For emails to registered participants, primarily the focus is going to be on fundraising. Around 2 months out, 2 to 3 months out, you could transition to do a push for team building, recruit your families and friends so they can get do some team fundraising. But about 1 month before the event, you're really gonna stop that recruitment communication to that audience, and it's just about fundraise, fundraise, fundraise. So frequency for this type of event, for registered participants after sort of their initial onboarding series of getting them going with a few emails, usually you want to communicate at least once a month, not too much more than that. As it gets closer to the event, about 2 months out, you probably want to send emails about 2 times a month. And in the final couple of weeks, an email a week to make sure they have their event info they need and are really doing those final fundraising pushes. For recruitment email frequency, start out about every other month, but as I mentioned, you can increase frequency around things like deadlines, discounts, promos, and challenges, and kind of drop off around 2 to 3 weeks before because they won't have time to fundraise. And your challenges and promos for this types of event is really focused on fundraising levels. If you have reward levels, you can focus the communication around those. If you have registration discounts, your recruitment communication can focus around those. So that's sort of the guidelines for those types of events. So let's look at an awareness event. Because your priority is different for this type of event, your approach for communication and timing should be different. For these types of events, you want to launch about 3 months out, because if you launch too early, you're going to lose them. People may sign up, and if they've signed up, 9 months before, they may have completely forgotten that they signed up for this thing, since it's sort of a low commitment event. For participants after onboarding series, you want to increase the frequency about a month before the event. So you can try to get them fundraising right away when their commitment is fresh, but then you really want to shift for your participant communication to do their own recruitment. You want them to bring their friends, to bring their family, to bring their team. And so because the primary focus of this event is recruitment, awareness, just getting bodies on the event, as far as the shift from recruitment to engagement, you kind of never really ease off the gas on recruitment messaging. There will be an initial fundraising message once someone registers, so they know how to fundraise and how to support your cause. But then you really want to transition them to bring your friends, build your team, keep pushing recruitment all the way, because your focus is on the number of people there. For frequency, you don't want to email these people too much. I would say about once a month, maybe twice a month as it gets closer to the event. Final couple of weeks, you could do 1 time a week. And for recruitment emails, for these types of events, recruitment emails will actually increase as it gets closer to the event, which is a little bit different than fundraising focused events. You want to get, it's your final week, registration is about to close, or if you're not ideally not closing registration, you can still show up, try and recruit those event day walk-ups the day before. And any challenges and promos you're doing for these types of events are usually focused on rewarding team size, rewarding participants, recruiting other participants, and growing your event. So let's talk activity-based events. these are the types of events where you get your participant maybe a runner that's looking for any type of 5K or an event they have an activity they have an affinity for. People will often register last minute. Someone who's committed to your cause will likely register earlier. So you can keep that in mind with your timing of your communications, that if when you're further out to the event, and you want to probably launch this type of event about 3 or 4 months out. When you're further out, you can do some fundraising communication, but when you're talking to people who are registering close to the event, you really don't want to turn them off with too much fundraising messaging if they're not there to fundraise. These are the types of events, since they don't have a minimum, you may want to ask them during the registration process if they intend to fundraise, if they want a fundraising page. I know Jillian Stewart talked on the session last week about how you can use that information about propensity to fundraise to alter your communication so you're not turning people away who aren't there to fundraise but are there to participate in your event, because maybe once they participate in the event, they may have an affinity to your organization and become supporters. So, but you want to nurture them. So for participant communication, leave them alone until they get closer to the event. And depending on propensity to fundraise, as I mentioned, as far as shifting, similar to awareness events, you never really want to ease off the gas on recruitment registering. So the shift to participant engagement would happen perhaps just right before the event. It's really more about recruitment. For participant support, you don't need to send a ton of emails. So maybe just 1 month out, 2 weeks out, the week of, just to make sure they have the event logistics, that if they are fundraisers, they know how to do it, and they just know, where they need to be and how to show up, and they feel like they have all the information they need. So your frequency for this type of event is going to be a lot less, though. For recruitment, similar to awareness event, you will have those, final week to register, or you can still show up to maybe get those day of walk-ups. And challenges and promos will also be more focused on team size and growing teams. Okay, so high commitment events. This is where the timing and the approach gets completely different than the last 2 types of events, particularly awareness and activity events. So for high commitments event, if at all possible, you really want to launch 1 year out. You want to try and get your participants to commit to the following year, literally while they're on that current year's event. Give them enough time to train, give them enough time to really build their fundraising. So you want to get your recruitment stuff started early. For participants, you want to have an immediate onboarding series. Get them to start fundraising right away when their commitment is fresh. Don't let them chicken out. Because these types of high commitment events, they can sometimes seem scary if it's got a big fundraising minimum, or perhaps it's some sort of super challenging physical activity you're not sure if you can do. You want to get that onboarding series to get them going, get some dollars in the fundraising account so they feel fully committed. And then around 6 months, anywhere from 6 months to 9 months before the event, you want to increase the frequency of the communication. About, twice a month. At about the 2-month out point, you're emailing them every week. In the final few weeks, it may be as much as twice a week, because this is the type of event where you're going to have a lot more committed participants. As far as when to shift the frequency, because of the high commitment of the event, you're not likely to get last minute registrants. So really at 1 month out, you can ease off the recruitment emails and really get your focus on engaging your participants and making sure they're fundraising and completely maximizing what they can do. And if you are sending recruitment emails closer to the event, if you're sending them 1 month out or even 2 months out, make sure your messaging in that recruitment emails includes tips and tools for quick fundraising. So they're not intimidated by the goal, that they realize that they can actually do this event. And for recruitment messaging to current participants, there will be some team building messages usually around about the 6-month point. But if they are building the teams, you want to make sure all those team members have time to train and fundraise and really aren't just signing up, but are actually going to participate and follow through with their commitment to your event. So you want to make sure you allow enough time for that. So for challenges and promos, there will be some recruitment promos kind of early on in the process, maybe around 4 months out, 6 months out. But then your challenges and promos are really focused around fundraising, reaching certain levels, particularly getting them to that minimum requirement, and then beyond, communicating about additional reward levels that you might have. But you do want to include some recruitment promos, because for these types of events, your best recruiters, honestly, are usually your registered participants. In addition to, peer-to-peer fundraising, this is usually, a peer-to-peer recruitment type of event as well. Most registrations for these types of events come from a direct referral because someone asked them to do it. That's the most common reason for people sign up for high commitment events. A few extra notes around deadlines. I talked about how frequency would shift. So while I said guidelines for, frequency maybe once a month for this type of event, the frequency is going to change when you get around deadlines. So if you have a fundraising or a team building challenge, for example, you want to send one email when it starts, one email 1 week before deadline, and one email 2 days before the deadline, maybe 1 day before the deadline for fundraising challenge. Because keep in mind, especially if it's a team building challenge, they need a couple days to talk to people to meet the challenge. So you want to give them at least 2 days before the deadline before you really push them on it. For discounts, so if you're sending recruitment email around a registration discount, you want to send one email when it starts, one email the day before the deadline, and definitely a last chance day of email, because you really will see an uptick in people registering with that discount with that final email. The push works. I know, we all see the emails that we get from stores with it. It's your last chance to save. And I know it sounds cheesy, but those emails really work. But a thing to keep in mind about frequency: don't send emails when you don't have something to say. If you find yourself about to send an email, particularly a recruitment email, and it just says the exact same thing as the last one you sent, if you have no particular message, if the only thing you're saying in your email is, hey, register for my event, don't send it. You're going to lose the trust in your audience if you really don't have anything to say. But you may be wondering, okay, well, but I want to send recruitment emails. I want to get people to register. So create something to say. If you have a registration fee, create a discount. If you don't, create a challenge. Communicate about fundraising rewards. Unveil some new exciting element of the event, or announce some news, particularly related to your mission. Perhaps there's, a breakthrough in your cause or a breakthrough in fundraising. You need a reason to communicate to people in order to uphold the trust in your email list. So just make sure that you have something to say when you're emailing people. And then extra little note, I just wanted to sort of stick it in here that's also related to recruitment emails. If you can, if your system allows it, allow an opportunity for people to say, not this year, or stop emailing me for a certain amount of time without forcing them to completely unsubscribe. Because you'll get a lot of people who maybe the event date doesn't work for them this year, or maybe they're injured or have a family commitment, and they don't want to keep getting emails asking them to register. And if their only option is for them to unsubscribe, then you've lost them forever. So give an option for someone to say, don't email me for a year, or don't email me for 6 months, or maybe just email me a little less. That'll help you keep your database, keep your unsubscribe rates low, and keep people happy to still get your communications. Okay, so that was timing. Now segmentation. What is segmentation? I assume that everyone knows, but just a little bit of explanation. It's basically, it's talking to different audiences in different ways. It's looking at who your people are, saying different things to different people, essentially. So when you're talking about segmentation, you would segment differently for recruitment versus participant engagement email. So those are the two buckets that we're going to divide things into when we talk about segmentation. So first, recruitment. What are the different things that you can segment on for recruitment? Well, you can look at their connection to your organization. Have they given to your organization in the past? Have they participated in the event in the past? Have they been an advocate or supporter for your organization before? In addition to connection to organization, there's the connection to your event. What's their participation history? Are they brand new to this event? Is just their second time? So perhaps they're a repeater, or are they a loyal participant? Are they the type of person that keeps coming back year after year? Because you want to talk to those people differently than someone who's brand new for your event, especially when you're recruiting. And also in connection to the event is their past team status. Were they a team captain in the past? Were they connected to a team? You definitely want to use that information when you're talking to them to get them to re-register, and their past fundraising history. Are they, if you don't have a minimum, are they someone who never fundraised year after year? Are they someone who always just met the minimum? Or are they a superstar fundraiser? Do they have lifetime history of raising, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars for your organization? You want to talk to these people differently. If nothing else, so they feel like they're being heard and recognized and understood. Because people appreciate it if the communication is personalized to a sense like, oh, I recognize that you're a superstar fundraiser for an organization, or I recognize that you're just here for the activity and you don't fundraise. And that'll help your recruitment emails be more effective if you segment by that. Another thing you can segment by is location. Where do they live? Especially if your event has a virtual aspect or a hybrid way of participating. You want to talk to them differently if they're going to be there in person or if they're going to be there virtually. And even if it doesn't have a virtual element, you may want to talk to people you're recruiting differently if they have to travel to your event versus if they're local. Another thing you can segment on for recruitment email is audience source. Where did you get their contact information from? This is particularly relevant if you're getting a list from another source. So for example, if you teamed up with a running group to send an email to their group, your recruitment messaging to them is going to be focused on the running. Or if you sourced a list from a organization that's related to your cause, then your recruitment messaging to them is really going to be cause focused. For example, if the list is people who've been helped by your organization at a particular medical center or something like that, you just want to tailor the messaging to recognize where you got their information from and what their interest in your event might be. Another thing important to segment on is interactions with your communications. Are these people opening your emails? Are they clicking on your emails? If someone is not engaging with your communications over the course of a whole year or even several years, know when to give them a break. This will help keep your list clean. It'll help improve your email deliverability. Stop talking to people, or stop sending emails to people if they're not interested in your emails, or if they're dumping your emails in your junk folder, or at the very least, stop the frequency. If they're not opening and clicking, considering, okay, maybe we'll just email them once a year every time we open registration, or maybe we'll email them once a year right when registration's about to close. Okay, so those are all the different things you can segment on recruitment. And let's talk about all the different things that you can segment on when you're talking to participants. So number one, fundraising. And fundraising has a lot of different aspects to it, right? There's historical fundraising. What have they raised in the past? Like I mentioned, same with when you're segmenting on for recruitment, you also want to talk to registered participants differently. If they have participated in the past but never raised money before, or if they're always sort of the just meet the minimum people, or if they're the super fundraisers who really are going above and beyond, you want to segment based on that. And you also want to segment on current fundraising. So where they're at, like, have they raised any money yet? Usually want to break that into 3 or 4 groups. Like you want to segment the zero balance people, the low balance people, the mid balance people, and then the high, the above and beyond people. It depends on the fundraising minimum of your event, as well as the history of fundraising. If it's the type of event that people typically, raise between $0 and $100, then maybe you're not breaking that into 4 levels. But if it's an event where people raise anywhere from 0 to 10,000, then you do want to set some markers so you're talking to people differently, depending where they're at. And then relationship to reward levels. If you have tiered fundraising rewards, you can talk to them differently or send emails based on you're close to the next level, you're almost there, or you just passed the next level, you just earned this thing. Or if there's a minimum, you're close to the minimum, you're almost there, or you just passed the minimum, congratulations, set a new goal. In addition to fundraising, you can segment participant communication based on their connection to the event, their past participation. Are they brand new to this event? Are they repeat, which means like, is there just their second time back, or are they the loyal participant who's, been back to your event 3, 5, 10 times? You want to recognize that both so they feel heard and so your message can be effective. And their past team status. Are they past team captain? Are they past team captain of a large team? So perhaps your communication can really focus on using that team captain as a conduit to spread your message to their team members. And then you can also segment, of course, on connection to your cause. Are they personally affected by it? Did they sign up to support a family or friend? Or are they just here for the activity and they don't necessarily have a connection to your cause, but maybe through participating in your event, then they may develop a connection to your cause. Then you can segment on current team status. Are they a captain? Are they a team member? Are they an individual participant? They'll want to get different amounts of communication and different information. Another thing to segment on is participation type. If you have different participation types, a lot of events I know don't, but if you do, if you have, if it's a run and a walk and there's 2 different ways to sign up, you can talk to runners differently than you talk to walkers. Or if there's a virtual element, talk to the virtual people differently. If there's volunteers versus runners, talk to them differently. And then also you can segment based on location. As I mentioned, if there's a virtual participation type, you'll talk to them differently. If it's an in-person event, you can talk to people who live near there differently than people who are traveling to your event, especially if you have sort of pre-event gatherings or event logistics. You want to let people know if there's stuff actually near them to get them to get engaged in that. Other thing you can segment on are any questions you may have asked at the time of registration. But be wary about how many questions you ask at registration, because each question you add to a registration form is just a tiny little hurdle to getting them to register. So if you add ones, what questions maybe can you get rid of? If you're not using the information, take the question off the form. But examples of types of things you can ask are you interested in forming a team? Are you interested in connecting with other participants by sharing your contact info? Are you going to fundraise if there's no minimum? Do you need support? Why are you participating? How are you here? How did you hear about us? Those are the types of questions that you can segment your communication based on. Another thing is donor status. Did they donate themselves to this event? Or are they just solely peer-to-peer fundraising? Did they donate to your organization? That's sometimes you may not have that data. That's a little complicated, especially if you have multiple events under your organization. It may be a little harder to track, but if someone has supported your organization with a direct donation in the past, you can segment based on that. Also, you can segment based on age. If you have an event that has a wide range of ages and their age, adults fundraise differently than teens do. You don't want to talk to teens about their Facebook page because they'll laugh at you, or, even sending emails, because they also don't do that. So particularly when it comes to fundraise, you can segment your communication based on age, whether adults or teens. And we put in his PowerPoint teens 13 plus, because there are restrictions around communication to kids that are 12 and under. And, as it says, I am not a lawyer, but just contact your lawyer if you are sending emails to kids 12 and under, and just make sure that you're following all the regulations around that. But if you are following the regulations, communicate to kids differently than you are communicating to adults. They use a different language and they participate differently and they fundraise differently. So that's obviously a lot of things you can segment on. So you need to kind of set your priorities, what's most important. And that will vary based on the type of event you have. A fundraising event, your priorities are going to be current fundraising. Where are they at in their current fundraising? Number 2 priority is probably participation history. Are they a repeat participant? Are they brand new? Are they a loyal participant? And shortly after that, historical fundraising. Are they someone who's typically raised a lot of money for this event or not? For an awareness event, your priority is more going to be participation type. Are they participating virtually? Is this an in-person type participation? And then team status. Are they a captain? You want to talk to a captain differently than a team member, differently than someone who is just showing up solo. And probably third priority, if you can add it in, is their participation history. Are they brand new to this event? Or are they coming back year after year? For an activity-based event, your priorities, probably number 1, team status. Are they wrangling a whole team, or are they just showing up by themselves? And then this is where you really want to segment on connection to the cause and list source, that if someone is at your activity-based event for the cause, you can talk to them differently and a different amount of times than someone who is just there for the race. For a high commitment event, your priorities for segmenting, probably number 1 is participation history. A brand new person is going to need a lot more support and different types of support than someone who is extremely familiar with your event. And then current fundraising, since this is a high commitment event, probably has a high fundraising commitment. So you want to talk to them differently if they haven't even gotten started with their fundraising versus if they're really close to their minimum or if they're beyond. And then if you still have bandwidth to segment, you want to look at team status, are they a captain or not, as well as historical fundraising. So you can really recognize those people who've really gone above and beyond, or people who maybe have typically struggled with their fundraising, year after year. So they may need some additional support. Okay, so segmenting, in addition to segmenting, covers a lot of different things. So it's not just about content. It's not just about saying different things to different people. It's also about timing and frequency. You would email someone less frequently that was just looking for an activity. They just wanted to sign up for their local 5K versus someone who supported your cause or has a strong connection year after year. Team captains may be getting a different onboarding series than non-team captains, because you may be using them to disseminate messages to their team members. So well, I mentioned sort of the 3 levers of timing. Those 3 levers of timing also interact with segmentation, because your segmenting can affect how frequently you email someone, as well as what you say to them. So you really want to sort of map out the journey. Okay, so this is a lot of things you could do. So what's reality? When you look at all the segments, all the things you can do, think about, do you really actually have something different to say based on that information? Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and it doesn't mean you have to. You don't have to segment on every piece of information that you have about a participant if you really don't have different things to say to different people. And then think about, what do your systems allow you to do? What is your email platform? What does your CRM allow you to do? Can you set up autoresponders based on certain actions? Can you set up recurring emails so you can sort of set and forget? Can you collect the segmentation info you need? Do you know this past historical data about your participants as far as their fundraising and participation? Does your system allow you to conditionalize the content within the email, which means, can you send one email to your audience and have a paragraph say one thing to team captains and a different thing to someone not on a team, or a paragraph a sentence it's one sentence if they haven't raised any money, and it's a different sentence if they have raised $1, and a different sentence if they've raised $1,000. Maybe your system can't do it, but if it can, utilize it. What in your system can you automate? So segmentation can be overwhelming if you think of like, I have to create 20 different emails based on those 20 different segments. Maybe you can't. Maybe you don't have to. I mean, because maybe your system allows you the technology to automate some of that stuff. Do you have the data you need and the ability to collect it? Does your system allow you to A/B test messages, try out different frequencies and different timing with your audiences to see what works for you? Does your email system auto clean your lists? Most do these days, but just beware. Make sure you're keeping an eye on, are your emails getting through? Are you sending emails to bad email addresses? Because that's going to kill your deliverability rate and send your unsubscribe rate through the roof. So in addition to looking at your systems, then look at your staff. What do you have the time, knowledge, and capability? And that's how you can know like what priorities you can tackle. But keeping in mind, technology, your system can compensate for your staff and vice versa. Like if your system allows you to sort of set and forget segmentation for multiple events, that can make up for the fact that your staff is limited. So one person can actually manage the communication for multiple events. On the other hand, if your system is limited, extra staff hours can make up for those limitations. So just find your efficiencies where you can. And think about what other communication channels you have. I know we're primarily talking about email in all of these things, but eComm also, it overlaps with texting, social media, phone banking, if you still do that, in-person outreach, if you still do that. If you have an app, the communications that you're putting out on your website, those are all places where, you will vary your timing and your frequency and your segmentation. So keep those other communication channels in mind. And if there's things that you can't do with email, think about what other channels you can use for those messages. And so what happens when the world goes on fire? I think we all experienced this around March of 2020. What happens when there's a national disaster, a global pandemic, something big happens to your event, or something just big happens in the world? If it's something related to your cause, consider using it. Consider step up to this moment in time, this moment in history to support our organization. If it's not related, if it's not appropriate, consider stopping your emails. Consider going back to the drawing board with your timing and your messaging and your segmentation, and just shutting it down to rethink, does anyone want to hear from us right now? Does anyone want to email saying register for this 5K when something just really terrible and tragic just happened that no one can think about anything else? So while I've said things like use your system to set and forget, you want to set it but not completely forget it. Make sure that you do have a master list. You know all the recurring emails that are going out. You know all the autoresponders you have. So you can look at that and be like, oh, wait, we have to turn these things off. We want to make sure that we're not like, this is just going to sound tone deaf if we're still sending these emails. So just make sure you know what you're sending, essentially, so you can change it if you need to pivot. So basically, the whole conclusion of this is that strategy becomes tactics once you get down to mapping out your schedule, your timing, your frequency, and your segmentation of your emails. And then once you have those priorities, once you have that roadmap, then you have to create the content and actually write the thing. But that's someone else's topic for another week. So homework time. Homework. Let's see.
Well, and I was just going to think before we hop into homework, Joanne, I know that a couple questions have come in, and maybe before we tell people like, okay, here's some things we can do, we can just answer a few of those questions. And I know Carrie and Mark we're going to help and chime in on those as well. So I know we had an earlier question that came in talking about the 4 different types of events and really kind of laying out the differences between them in terms of timing and things of that nature. And Arlene asked, do you have to be just one type of event? Is it only an awareness event? Are you only a fundraising event? Or can you be a mixture of multiples?
I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, nobody's, putting you in a box. Those are mainly just guidelines to think about how your communication strategy would be different based on the type of event. So, maybe you're a hybrid fundraising awareness. So you don't have to be one type, but on the other hand, you can't be all things to all people. You have to have that number one priority. You can't say my number one priority is overall fundraising, and also my number one priority is attendance and awareness. One has to give. One has to be number one has to be number 2. So while you can be a mix, there has to be a top dog. There has to be a top priority when you're looking at your strategy.
Cool. Joanne, I love that you said that, and we'll continue this conversation next week as we talk about calls to action and content. And again, going back to last week, being really, really clear about the primary purpose of your program, and then moving through everything Joanne talked about today. And then next week, we'll talk about, okay, you're clear on the purpose of your program and who you're talking to, a little bit more about timing and segmentation. So now what are you actually going to say to get people to do what you need them to do? So this is all threading together really well.
Good. Okay. Are there more questions?
I
saw them sort of pop up, but I was just kind of like, I can't read those right now.
Yeah, Arlene, I'm seeing your clarifying question come in, and you're spot on, communicating differently to different types of people, those who just love to run and those who actually care about ending breast cancer, different motivations. And again, as we get into content next week and calls to action, we'll definitely cover that. And with 1 minute left, it does feel like time to issue homework.
Homework. All right, I'm going to share my screen again.
Okay.
Get going.
Okay, so homework, and you're probably all thinking of this through the presentation anyway. Number 1, which of the 4 event types are you? If you're a mix, which is your priority? So based on that, what do you think the overall timing should be for your schedule? When should you launch? When should you shift from recruitment to participant engagement? When When should you stop? What should your frequency be? Think about what limitations do you have in your technology? What can your system do? What limitations around your technology, your budget, and your staff is going to affect that timing? You know, we can all have a wish list of ideally what we want to do, but we have to bring it down to reality. So knowing that reality, then what are the possible segments can you use? What information do you know about your participants or about the group you're recruiting from? And then what are your priorities for those segments? Because you can't do everything, so you have to think about your priorities. And then what different things do you have to say for each of those segments? What's the different messaging? And then do you have any limitations that require you to focus your priorities? That, well, we just either don't have this information, or we literally have one person in an office using MailChimp. You know, we really need to focus on exactly what we can do. And then define what your communication channels are. What are all the things that you can use? Email, social, website, do you have an app? Do you have a texting program, phone banking, etc.? And then start building out your communication calendar on a spreadsheet. I did a sort of sample on the next slide, I think. Should start out this simply: a column, you know, for the timing, a column for the audience, for the topics, what sort of segmentation you're using, and then the status, kind of where it is in progress. And then you also, in addition to your calendar, you want to lay out a roadmap. A roadmap can look like all types of things. It depends on what works for you, but essentially a roadmap sort of shows the participant journey of what communications they're getting when. And I know these look a little bit like RE charts, especially the next one on the next slide, which is another type of roadmap that is a huge eye chart, but believe me, it means something to me and it means something to the other people who are reading it. So something like this might be useful so you can, this sort of maps the participant journey of when they're getting certain emails in their journey to the event. So that's your I know that's a lot of homework, but you don't actually have to build that stuff right now, but just think about putting that on your to-do list when you're doing your eComm strategy. Okay, I want to set my priorities. I want to look at what's possible. And then when I build my overall roadmap and my communications calendar. And that's your homework.
And then Carrie has an amazing little batch of extra homework for some of the overachievers out there.
And this is just to whet the appetite for next week as we do get into content and calls to action. So if you've done all of your week 1 homework and you've done all of your week 2 homework and you want to get ahead or just get your brain moving in that direction, here are a couple things to think about. And I know that everyone will receive this deck later on today or early next week. Mark has been great about circulating the content from the conference.
Thank you, Carrie. And I want to take just a moment to thank Joanne for all of her hard work, for doing a massive brain dump to put all of this information out here and together for you. I know just in the process of going through conversations with her and putting together the decks, I have learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to putting it into practice as we're building out 2022 e-communications. Mark, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, you guys rock. Appreciate everybody staying on. And sorry we ran a couple minutes over, but it's a lot of great content. And don't worry if you had to jump off. Well, you're not listening to this right now, but you're probably listening to the recording that you now have. So we'll share the slides. I think I even have a sample communications calendar. I'm going to put that in the LinkedIn group that we have going, which will also be in the emails that you receive as you go through this. So make sure, and the recording is also going to be available and emailed out with links to that. So love for all the feedback, all the interaction, and thank you so much, Joanne and Julie and Carrie, for a great session, and thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks, Mark.